I'm now giving the floor to the two last speakers of today, ladies and gentlemen. They will present a common paper in which the books of Christopher Plantin and the Mauritius family will be analyzed as luxury commodities. So perhaps we will learn a bit more about price perception by consumers. I don't know if you will cover that. Well, I'm very curious about it. The two speakers are Francesco Ammannati, who is, like all the people in this session, part of the team of the ERC Emo Trade project. Francesco has a PhD in economics. That's not surprising at this conference, perhaps. He's a specialist in economic history and has worked on an attempt to reconstruct the activity of a wool workshop in the second half of the 15th century in Italy. His PhD was on that very subject as well. He has taught as an adjunct professor in the economic history course at the University of Florence, and he's a member of the teams of two ERC-funded projects. So he must be very brilliant indeed. And the second speaker of this paper is Goran Proot, whom I suppose the most of you have met at previous occasions. He has become a leading person in the book historical discipline in Flanders and abroad. He has a PhD in language and literature, not in economics, I must warn you. He's been working on the Jesuit theatre in the Southern Low Countries in the early modern times. He's been part of the research team of the short title catalogue Flanders, and he has been director of that project for some years. He is currently the director of the, editor-in-chief of the book historical journal De Gulden Passer, and is the president of Flanders Book Historical Society. He has been working as a librarian here in Antwerp, but also in Washington at the Francis Shakespeare Library, and at the Bibliothèque Mazarine in Paris. But now for some 2 years, I suppose, he's been part of the team of Angela Nuovo. So please, we are very eager to listen to you.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you very much. A book was a commodity like jewels, gloves, handkerchiefs, rosaries, pepper, and any other luxury product. It was not a commodity like meat, beans, wheat, wine, and other products that everyone needs to buy just in order to live. This is how book historians usually describe the nature of books as commodities. The book is a product that, in contrast to food, fuel, or housing, can be missed. In times of shortage, prices of grains go up as a result of the imbalance between offer and demand. This point was dramatically made in 1585 and 1586, when the southern Netherlands were haunted by an extreme wet summer and, as a consequence, very poor harvests. As a result, prices spiked as never before, and common people had no other choice than to postpone or drop unnecessary expenses. In contrast, prices of luxury goods remain relatively stable, as they do not experience shocks in supply or demand. Buyers of luxury products usually do not suffer as much as common people under inflation, decreasing wages, and rocketing food prices. In this paper, we survey the trend of book prices at the Officina Plantiniana in Antwerp in the period 1581-1655, and our goal is to see how these prices evolve compared to fluctuations in people's real income in this period, their wages and rents. And this will help to understand the status of the books produced by the famous Officina Plantiniana during the last years of its founder, Christopher Plantin, and the business operation directed by his successors after July 1589. In the first part, we will discuss how we assess income, wages, rents, and book prices. And second, we will compare trends between income and book prices, which will be followed by a discussion and a conclusion.
The idea is to verify whether the prices of the book produced by Officina Plantiniana, or rather their trend over time, follows or diverges from that of a general price index represented by a basket of goods, measuring the average consumption of the population of the Brabant area, and from that of another sui generis but still representative commodity, as the average rents of houses in Antwerp. Those prices will be related to the nominal and real wages of two categories of workers belonging to a lower middle layer of the population. In any case, not to the cultural and economic elite, compositors active in the Officina and master masons. For the creation of the price index, we relied on the data proposed by John Munro, obtained by processing the basket of consumables offered by Herman van der Vee in a paper he wrote some decades ago. Van der Vee observed the behavior of prices in the Brabant region of Antwerp, Leer, Mechelen for the 3 centuries 1400–1700, thus covering the entire price revolution era along with the preceding century. Our analysis is focused on the period 1581–1655. The set of goods considered by Van der Vee includes a combination of food products such as farinaceous, grains, drink, barley malt, meat, fish, dairy products, butter and cheese, and industrial products including fuel, light, charcoal candles, lamp oil, and textiles, linen, canvas, coarse woolens. A remarkably positive element of the index proposed by Munro van der Vee is that its components do not have fixed shares in the total basket. The proportion accounted for by each commodity group vary over time with changes in relative prices, and the major variation involves grain prices. This is important for at least 2 reasons. First, grain represented a large part of the entire consumption basket, especially for the lower middle classes of the population. Second, grain prices frequently experience severe fluctuations. For example, during prolonged period of population growth and presumed diminishing returns on agricultural production, the relative price of grains usually rose more than those of animal products, which in turn rose considerably more than the prices of labor-intensive industrial products. As food prices rose, most lower-income households would have been forced to spend a larger share of their budget first on bread grains, then on drink, and somewhat less on meat, fish, and dairy products. Industrial goods, on the other hand, would usually have ranked last in importance in the household budget because, with the exception of fuel, most such expenditures could have been postponed. Consequently, consumer demand for most such products would have risen less than would demand for foodstuffs, and that would have been reflected in the corresponding behavior of relative consumer prices. Conversely, during prolonged periods of population decline, especially with the absence of any inflationary factors such as coinage debasement and disruption from warfare or other supply shocks, grain prices tended to fall, and fell more so than did other commodity prices, accounting for a smaller share of the basket. The construction of this index, in sum, aims to better reflecting the historical reality of consumer expenditures. The price index, calculated in this way, compiled for 5 yearly intervals and adapted by us to take as a basis the period 1581–1585, was then used both to compare the trend of the book price index and to deflate the nominal wages of the 2 categories of workers identified according to the standard formula: real wage index equals the nominal money wage index divided by the consumer price index. It should be noted that the wage index provided by Munro for the master masons has been adapted by him to reflect the trend of seasonal work. As for the composer's wage index, It has been obtained from the data of 63 workers active at the Officina over several years during the period covered by our analysis. Finally, the index of rents has been derived for the one elaborated by Scolliers, to which we refer for further details, and modified so as to have the 5-year period 5081-5085 as a basis.
As an eminent colleague has pointed out in a recent article, the very nature of the book object itself demands special attention when deciding to perform aggregate data analysis. Indeed, a book is never just a book. There are books of all kinds on different subjects, in different formats, in different languages, and geared at different audiences. Some of these features have impact on the price of books. An analysis of Parisian book prices in booksellers' catalogues of Henri Etienne between 1552 and 1555 has shown that both specific bibliographical formats, such as in Etienne's case sedecimo, and the use of exotic types, such as Greek and Hebrew, force prices up. In the case of the Antwerp printer Martinus Nucius I, who was active between 1540 and 1558, the editions in Spanish were more expensive than the books he produced in Latin. And furthermore, it's obvious that the use of a second color, usually red, causes higher prices. And last but not least, different analyses of book prices at Officina Plantiniana have shown that the presence of illustrations in relief or in intaglio, or the use of specific paper stocks, such as very thick or very large paper, also weigh in on prices. For the purpose of this paper, we focus on ideal retail prices fixed by Plantin and his successors in the period 1581-1655, as recorded in manuscript M321 at the Museum Plantin Moretus in Antwerp. It's a dynamic production list of titles with prices for the book trade starting in 1580 and was completed year by year by several hands down to 1655. It contains 2,367 entries of editions and in a number of cases different issues of editions. Prices are expressed in Carolus guilders, the account money usually used in the Officina Plantiniana for earnings and expenses. One Carolus guilder consisted of florins, each one of which was made up of 20 stivers. Not unimportant for this analysis, prices always pertain to first-hand unbound books, that is in albis, thus avoiding difficulties connected with bindings and other types of finishing. The production list is beyond any doubt a very valuable source for the study of prices of first-hand books on offer by the Officina over a period of 76 years. It allows for comparisons of pricing strategies of the last 9 years under its founder, Plantin, and the 3 successors of his. The sheer number of entries in the document may suggest that it is complete, but that's not the case. Some editions are lacking, but in general, the sheer number of data is so vast that it guarantees a reliable reflection of price trends. And in order to make comparisons across prices of all kinds of books possible, we recalculated the price per copy to price per printing sheet. And by doing so, we obtain a stable price per unit across varying sizes of books. And then we recalculated a quinquennial averages as an index, taking the period 1581-85 as a base, which allows for a comparison with the Antwerp price index, wages and rents.
This first graph indicates the evolution on the price index of the average basket of consumable in periods of 5 years, taking the period shown before as a base for the index. Since the index is based on the period just before the fall of Antwerp, it reflects the immediate effects of this disruptive event in the period which follows immediately. The surge of prices is also caused by the very bad harvests in the years 1585-1586 and by the progressive devaluation of local currencies. By the beginning of the 17th century, price levels are back to normal and stay at the original level during the peaceful years of the truce. The end of the truce is marked by a sudden rise in price levels until the period 1620-1630. Prices rise again from the period 1636-1640 onwards by it a slower pace and drop again in the last quinquennial of our survey. The second graph compared the price index with real wages of master masons and of compositors active at the Officina Plantiniana. It shows that nominal wages are not being compensated by the sudden rise of prices after the fall of Antwerp and the end of the 16th century. In the period 1601-1620, masons, masters and compositors at the Officina enjoyed better times, as their income must have allowed some extra purchase power. This changes dramatically after 1621. Incomes go down, while prices go up. As a result, people impoverished considerably for at least some 35 years. Remarkably, the compositors at the Officina Plantiniana systematically earned more than the mason's master from the 1610s onwards, and must have suffered less from diverging prices and incomes. Graph 3 shows the evolution of rents in this period compared to wages. Because the massive depopulation of the city after the fall of Antwerp, the next graph, rents plummeted in the following years to increase again from the beginning of the 17th century until the end of the truce, after which they dropped again. Interestingly, rent levels are systematically parallel to, by levels of wages. It confirmed, once again, how compositors were always better off than masons' masters. Let's compare now book prices as they were fixed by the Officina Plantiniana in this period. This graph compares the evolution of the price index with the average nominal retail price for sheet of new unbound books. Remarkably, it reflects a steep increase for book prices, diverging from the price index from the period 1591-1596 onwards, probably not by coincidence, the period when Jan Moretus I takes over the business of his deceased father-in-law. The final graph does only confirm this growing divergence between prices, wages and rents, expressed in real terms that is deflated using the general price index. Book prices at the Officina evolve in a sovereign way as they detach completely from evolutions in prices, wages, and commodities like housing rents. These findings do not only confirm what we already knew about the direction taken by Plantin's successors at the firm, but they also put in a wider perspective. The comparison with living standards of a common people allow for a more articulated interpretation of the book prices they established. Other studies about the Officina Plantiniana have indeed demonstrated that Jan Moretus I and later generation gradually moved towards the production of more expensive book formats, both large and very small, that they diminished the share of woodcut illustration in favor of more beautiful but also more expensive intaglio illustrations, that they produce more than before special runs of editions on luxury paper, that they systematically focused more and more, almost exclusively, on liturgical books, printed in two colors, which, as they were in Latin, could be catered to local and international markets. All these elements match well with the specific target publics of well-to-do individual and institutional customers who did not suffer much from inflation, debased currencies, rising prices, and dropping wages. More than ever, by the mid-17th century, the Officina Plantiniana had moved to the upper strata of the book market. The conclusion, this method offers clear insight of general price trends and wages compared to the prices of books. Prices of books published by the Officina Plantiniana evolve in ways that they are no longer related to the average trend of prices or the evolution of wages. If regular books are already to be labeled as luxury commodities, then books from the Officina Plantiniana are to be considered luxury objects to the power. Once again, this survey showed that Officina Plantiniana occupied a specific place in the market, and that trends shown in their business records do not necessarily reflect strategies of other printers, publishers, and that their pricing strategy was probably not the norm for other businesses. It is clear that book prices from the Officina cannot serve as a good proxy for book prices in general, as they are not targeting typical customers from the middle class. Future research should try to define common books and study their prices. It is very likely that other publishing firms developed other pricing strategies to meet the demands of common and local publics in need for, amongst others, almanacs, prayer books, and school books. Thank you.
Thank you very much.